So, guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be working on a few portraits I took for a client, and I just want to run you through my editing process real time. By real time, I mean I haven't worked on this image. I'm just going to start working on it, so I don't know how things are going to go. But for the sake of the tutorial, we're just going to work on it together. So, well, I don't think I've done anything special on this image yet. Let's see the before. So I just did a few exposure tweaks. This is before and this is after. So if you see it, I basically just killed the highlights. And if you see the exposure, I added a little bit of exposure. I killed the highlight and I tried to blend the skin tone. I think that's everything I've done on the image. Nothing extraordinary. By default, my clarity and structure is always at somewhere between 10 and 11, and I already made it a preset. So once I load images from specifically my camera to Capture One, it automatically just bumps the clarity and structure to 11:11. That makes the image a bit sharper. And from there, I think we're just going to move to Photoshop and, like I said, see how it goes from there. So I'm going to edit with Photoshop now. TIFF, the format is always TIFF 16-bit, so I have a great color. I have a very high color, whatever to work with, and uncompressed. Yeah, so move to edit. So now the image is going to open in Photoshop, and for some reason I'm going to have to cut out some parts of this because I refused to get the USB cable for my Wacom tablet, but I think let me see if it's gonna work. Oh, okay, great. So it's working. Unfortunately, you can't have a full view of my tablet because it's to the side, but I've got my pen. Let me give you a quick view. I use a Wacom Intuos Pro medium size with my pen, and if you really want to get into retouching, I think you don't have a choice than to start working with a tab because it makes your workflow much faster and easier. So that being said, you can see the image opening with Photoshop. The reason why it's cropped automatically is because I always have my crop on 4:5 to make it, to put it on the proper size for Instagram. But for now, I'll leave the crop because I can always work on that later, and I'll start with fixing, the blemishes in the background. So for some reason, there's something here, maybe a chair, something in the image that I was trying to cut out but couldn't fully cut out. So I'll start with that and feel content aware. That should take care of that. And then moving on, there's some specks on the ground, on the floor around that leg. I'm just going to use my clone stamp to get rid of those. It's a very easy, fast workflow. And as you can see, my client, because this is not a model, this is a paid shoot, but the client was really an amazing subject to photograph. She made the work really easy. She's got good skin, the makeup was amazing, and everything just works well. So the first thing I always do is work on my skin. So I go straight for my frequency separation, and I have a preset I use, not because I don't know how to start from scratch, but anything to save time. So I run my frequency separation preset, and when I'm trying to get my radius for the Gaussian blur, I always find a spot where I can see tiny little texture but I have all my color information. The reason why I do this is because I try to get as much color in my color layer. So whatever color issue or blemishes I fix is automatically fixed in the color layer. So I like to push my Gaussian blur as low as possible just to make sure that I get all the color in the color layer. So I'll play around with it, increase the blur. I can zoom in the image so I can see the details a bit more. I'll keep increasing the blur to see how much I can get out, and I think 4.4 is looking like a pretty decent number to use. As you can see, I have some texture looking things here, but they're mostly color, not texture. I might even go a bit lower. And now I'm starting to get more texture in the shot, so maybe I'll move a bit higher. And yeah, that seems like a good place to start. So when I have that, and my frequency is divided into two, I start from my low layer, so I fix all the color issues. Reason why I like to fix the color issues first is because a lot of times if you come to the texture to start working on the texture blemishes, you might have some things that will make it seem like the texture is still not fully clean yet, but the issues are in the color layer. So I'll just rather start with my color layer, and when I'm doing that, I like to turn off my texture because it helps me see exactly what I'm doing with the color layer. And my flow, and I set my flow to about 10-11, and my wet to also like 10-11, somewhere around there works perfectly for me. For some reason, I don't know what load and mix does, and I've noticed it doesn't really affect the final image I'm working on, so I don't really touch that. And then we move to we move to working on it. So when I'm using my mixer brush, I think I forgot to say that I use mixer brush to work on my color layer, to blend the colors, the exposures, the highlights, the midtones, and everything. And when I'm using it, I try to keep my brushing very light and stick to areas with very similar exposure values. That means if I'm shading around my shadows, I keep it on the shadow side, and if I'm working on the highlights or the midtones, I keep my brushing strictly around that area. And the reason why I do that is to keep the image looking as natural as possible, but without the discoloration and blemishes. And if you see that I'm not really doing a lot, I'm just jumping around the image and doing light brushes. This is because I like to keep my images looking as natural as possible. I don't like it looking too retouched, especially when I'm working with clients' portraits. So for that reason, I prefer to keep my brushing as light as possible to just blend the transitions in the tonal range. And after doing all that, the image comes out still looking natural, and it just looks like the client has a good skin. So I think from here I'm going to fast forward just to save time, and I'll keep working on what I'm doing. Guess I'll see you guys when I'm back. And every now and then I'd like to turn on my my high layer, my frequency layer, to see how much or how far I've gone, and then toggle on and off the frequency separation folder just to see how much I've gone. So if you're seeing it now, you can see that the correction is really subtle, but a lot of the color transitions have been smoothened. At this point, most of the time I'm really fine because, like I said, I'm not trying to go too far on my image. So I'll just switch to my high frequency now, where I'll switch to my clone stamp to take out the skin blemishes. And when I'm using my Alt key, I hope you guys already know how to use your, what's it called, clone stamp on the high layer. I like to click very close. I like to pick my source very close to the parts where I want to fix, so that way it looks natural. Once again, I'm going to fast forward this time just to speed through the process, because this thing takes a lot of time, especially when the skin is not the smoothest. Again, for the record, when I'm doing customer jobs like this, I strive for an amazing image, but not necessarily perfection. Why do I say that? When you're working on beauty images that are meant for brands, you have to put in a lot more attention to make sure everything looks perfect. But as you can see in the beginning, let me zoom out, it's a full body image. So not a lot of people, if she posts it on social media or decides to print, not a lot of people are going to zoom in on the face. So what I owe this customer is to make sure the full image looks clean, the skin looks perfect from this view, and I don't expect anybody to pixel peep or start zooming in totally to see every single blemish, which will lead me to a total digression from my retouch and talk about an issue I always have with a friend. I have a photographer friend that spends a lot of time pixel peeping images. Like after every portrait he takes, he tries to zoom in totally to make sure that, oh, the eye is very sharp, it's in focus. And this person is primarily an event photographer, not a portrait photographer. And I always have the conversation with him that we as creatives, we tend to set an unreasonably high standard for ourselves. It is totally not bad to set very high standards for yourself, but you also need to understand that in the course of setting that high standard for yourself, you tend to, one, beat yourself up more. Two, you tend to spend a whole lot more time seeking perfection in every image you work on. And as a business, if you're running photography as a business, your turnout time is also very important, because you might have 5 to 10 shoots in a week. All the customers have to get their pictures when they have to. So I try to explain to him that only us photographers pixel peep, because we know what we're looking for. Clients don't know what you're looking for in the picture unless the client has some photography knowledge. So you don't expect clients. It's not even that you don't expect clients. Clients are never going to zoom into images to see, oh, is my eyes in focus? Is my nose sharp? Is the depth of field too shallow? Are my ears still in focus? No client does that. So for me, my theory is, if you look at the image at first glance, not zooming in, look at the full image, and if it looks sharp and it looks good, it is good enough 90% of the time. As a matter of fact, 95% of the time, it is good enough for your clients. So there's no reason to always want to zoom in to pixel peep. That being said, I think I'm done with that face. Once again, I'm going to zoom out and check before, after. You can see the very subtle difference, but the subtleness of the retouch makes a lot of difference in the overall picture. Then now I'm going to go to our hands, because every part of the image needs to be worked on. Go to our hands and also try to work on the blemishes, smoothing the transitions. A lot of clients always want you to eradicate / eliminate their dark knuckles and subtle imperfections. That's what I'll call it, imperfections or perceived imperfections. And I always have the issue with some clients that I explain to them that there's a level of correction I can do, where it still looks natural. Because if you see my wrist, I'm dark skinned, I've never bleached, but I still have dark knuckles. Because I think the fold around the wrist just makes the darkened knuckles natural. And everybody has, to an extent, a darker knuckle than the rest of their skin. Same thing with knees and stuff. So I don't see why people strive for, in quotes, unrealistic perfection in images. It's more convincing that things are natural when the subtle imperfections that are expected from everybody is still part of the final image. There are corrections to be made, but the subtle imperfections should not be overworked on, so the images stay looking natural. At this point, I think I've done enough. Like I said, I try not to do too much, mostly to save time and also to not make the images look over edited. So I'm just going to merge my layers now. And then after merging my layers, I'm going to go for a crop. And for images like this, that is a full length, full body image, I try to just use what's it called content aware to extend the backdrop or extend the background. Because if I stick to using a 4x5 crop for this image, I'm going to chop off a lot of the background in the image and it's going to be too close. So I'll just zoom out a bit. Luckily, the background has pretty uniform lighting and texture and everything. Then I use my content aware and do the crop. Hopefully this stays perfect and we'll see how it goes. Voila. Now we have a 4x5 crop with a perfect image. The next thing I'll do for an image like this is I can maybe try to do my levels just to brighten our skin tone a little bit more. So once I increase the levels to brighten our skin tone, I'll adjust the shadows to make it a bit more uniform, or a bit to bring in contrast a bit more. That's too much. 6 seems fine. Turn on, turn off. Yeah, so now it's a bit brighter. You can see our skin better. And also, looking at the image, I feel the skin is a bit too magentish on the magenta side for me. So I'll just come and pick the skin tone and just do a +1. Yeah, to tone down the magenta on the skin, and I might reduce my opacity and feel to blend it in a bit more. Lastly, what I like to do to help focus on my subject a bit more is to create a gradient around the image. But in Photoshop, I like to create it using curves and adjustment layers. So if I come here now and I pick on the background and I turn it down, it gets darker. But the good thing about using adjustment layers is the fact that I can easily brush out my subject. So if I do this, I'm sorry I'm not breaking down what adjustment layers are, because I hope at this point we should know a lot of these things. Pardon me for a second. Yeah. So now I've brushed out my subject. Then I'll reduce my opacity and my flow, because like I said, I'm trying to create a gradient. Then brush around the subject a bit more. So when I reduce my flow and opacity, what happens is that the effect of the gradients reduces around the image. And now I have problems of using, what's it called, a slow system. Now I have a gradient that looks a bit more natural. And then I'll go here and increase my feather just to blend it in some more. And yeah, I can merge my layers, because I have to do the last thing, which is liquify. This is a destructive way of editing. Don't do it the way I do it. I just like to reduce the load on my RAM and remove layers that I think I'll never go back to. And then on the final merged layer, I'll go to run my liquify. Wait for that to open. And then just the arms and some parts of the image, I'll just bring in a bit more. She's plus size, like I said, so I'm not trying to make her look overly slim. I just need to tone down some of the roundness. And I think I'm done. Okay. So now I'm going to save what I have done in Photoshop and then go back to my Capture One. And here I have the final edited image. Before, after, before, after. So, like I said, this is a very quick way of running through a client's image that is not a major beauty or commercial photo shoot. So the workflow is way faster. I might have been a bit slower here because I'm trying to make a tutorial and I'm talking as I'm editing. So normally it takes me like 15 to 20 minutes per image. And yes, so thanks for sitting through this tutorial if you did, and hopefully I'll be posting more of this over time. Once again, thanks for watching my video. Thank you very much.